Dear students, welcome back to this video. Now in the last video, we are talking about different types of training. And there we discussed about 4 different types of training. What were those? We have looked at on-the-job training, vestibule training, coaching, and job rotation method. Now in this video, we are going to discuss 3 further different types of training, alright? But just to mention, after we are done with today's 3 kinds of training, the types of training will not be over then. We will continue our discussion on different types of training in the next class as well. So without further delay, let's start today's discussion. Just to mention here, just as before, when you hear the name of the training methods in today's class, just hearing the name of the method, you will be able to guess what happens in that training method. So let's start. The first method of today is really easy. And trust me, all of you know it. And that is lecture method. See, I'm 100% sure all of you can guess what happens in this method. Even though you know it, I have to take you through the boring definition of lecture, and then I'm going to give you a brief example of a lecture session. So let's take a look at the formal definition. So here it goes. Here, a facilitator delivers lectures on a given topic or a specific job so that the new trainees can learn to do the job. See, I'm sure you can definitely come up with better definitions here. So here is the example. Maybe a lecture session is being given on how to build a car from the scratch. So if a lecture is going on, so on the left hand side, you will be sitting in the class like this. And on the right hand side, the instructor will be giving you instructions on how to assemble a car. So that is what happens in a lecture session, right? So I'm not going to spend any more time on the lecture topic. Let's move on to the next method of training, which is apprenticeship. Now this is very crucial. Let's listen to the definition and the concept of apprenticeship very carefully for the next 2 minutes. And then the concept will be very easy for you to understand. So what happens in an apprenticeship program? Here goes the definition. Apprenticeship training is a process by which people become skilled workers, usually through a combination of formal learning and long-term on-the-job training, often under the guidance of an experienced person. So let's take a look at the very crucial part of the definition here. So apprenticeship training is a combination of formal learning method, so which is sort of a classroom learning method, and long-term on-the-job training. So when we combine these 2 methods for a specific new trainee or employee, we get apprenticeship training. So now, if I want to present this concept to you in a picture, it will look something like this. So we have long-term on-the-job training, and at the same time, we have formal classroom learning. And when we combine these 2 methods at the same time, then we have an apprenticeship program. Do not worry if this concept is still not clear to you. I'm going to explain this concept with an example very soon. So let's take a look at the example here. Say you want to train a new going to be doctor, alright? So how do you train someone who wants to be a doctor using the apprenticeship program? Now, for an apprenticeship program, as I said earlier, we have to have long-term on-the-job training and classroom learning. So let's take a look at the picture. So for this apprenticeship program, on the one hand, we have to have on-the-job training like this picture, and along with this, we have to combine this method with classroom learning like this picture. I'm sure many of you can relate to this photo here. So yes, for an apprenticeship program for a doctor to work out, we have to have on-the-job training. So the doctor has to perform some sort of operations, maybe minor operations as the person is a new doctor, and at the same time, formal classroom learning like this. So these 2 can give us an apprenticeship program. Now let's take a look at another example here. What can be an apprenticeship program for a professional racer? So again, for a professional racer also, we have to combine these 2 methods, on-the-job training and formal classroom type learning. So for a professional racer, it will look something like this. So on the one hand, we will have on-the-job training. So the racer will race on the track, and at the same time, the racer will have to attend classes on racing. Now, what can be some of the possible topics a racer can discuss in a class or learn in a class? Maybe the rules and regulations on the street. And what are the different functions of a car? How to take care of a car? And most importantly, how to drive a car. So these can be some of the topics a racer can learn in a classroom setting. So as I said just earlier, if we combine these two methods of on-the-job training and classroom type learning, then we can get an apprenticeship program for a professional racer or a driver. Now let's take a brief look at two other examples of apprenticeship program. So first, we have an electrician who may require 100 hours of classroom instructions and 6 months of on-the-job experience. So when we combine these two methods, we get an apprenticeship program for an electrician. Next, for a chef like Tom here, we may require 50 hours of classroom attendance and 1 year of cooking experience. So 1 year of on-the-job learning. So here, for Tom to become a chef, the apprenticeship program has to have both classroom learning and on-the-job cooking experience. So I guess everybody now understands what is an apprenticeship program. So now let's move on to the last training method for today. So as the last training method, we have job instruction sheet, which is also called job instruction training program. Now again, when you hear the name, many of you might be able to guess what happens in this method. So as the name suggests, that it has some sort of an instruction sheet for the training or instruction manual for the training, right? So I'm going to explain this method very soon. Just keep in mind, we will have a job instruction sheet or job manual sheet. So this job instruction sheet or the piece of paper lists all the instructions needed to perform the job properly. So let's take a look at the formal definition here. Here it goes. Many jobs or parts of jobs consist of a sequence of steps best learned step by step. Such step-by-step training is called job instruction training or JIT. Now the definition is not over yet. We have another very important part of this definition. So here goes the next important part. Here, the trainee is given a manual or instruction sheet which explains the work step by step. This is the most crucial part of job instruction sheet's definition. So again, in this method, what we have is an instruction sheet. So we give this instruction sheet to our trainee or employee, and by reading this instruction sheet and going through all the steps one by one, a person or a trainee is able to start doing the job or learning the job from the very beginning. I'll give you an example of job instruction sheet very soon. Do not worry about it. Before that, let's take a look at the whole process of preparing a job instruction sheet. So what happens here? First, list the job's required steps and in a proper sequence. Now, let's say we are going to use a mechanical paper cutter or any machine for that matter. And for that, the first thing we have to do is list the job's required steps in a proper sequence. After that, we have to list a corresponding key or important point beside each step. Do not worry about what I said right now in the last point. I'm going to explain this point very soon with a thorough example. The main point here is that we have to list all the instructions of the job step by step on a piece of paper or on an instruction sheet. Now let's take a look at the example here. Let's say we are going to prepare a job instruction training or a job instruction sheet for a machine operator. And let's assume this machine is a paper cutting machine. So we cut papers of different sizes using this machine. So how do we prepare a job instruction sheet for this job? So here is a list of all the steps in operating a machine. Now for illustration purposes, I'm going to explain the first 3 steps here. Once you understand these 3 steps and how they work, you will easily understand the rest of the instructions here. So let's go through it step by step. So the first step in operating this machine is to start the motor. So that is the very first step. And we don't have any key points regarding this step here. So don't worry about it. After we are done with the first step, the next step is to set cutting distance. So as it is a paper cutting machine, we have to set the size in which the papers are going to be cut. So after you start the motor, the next step is to set cutting distance. And about this step, there is a very important point. What is that? Carefully read the scale to prevent wrong sized cut. So when we are setting the cutting distance of that machine, we have to be very careful about the distance or the size of each cut. If we are not careful about the scale, in that case, the paper size will be wrong. So this is a very important point regarding this step. So once we are done with this step, the next step is to place paper on cutting table. And the key important point to note about this step is make sure paper is even to prevent uneven cut. So when placing the paper, we have to make sure that we have placed that paper on an even surface. Otherwise, different papers will have different sizes, or the cut will not be that good. So we are done with the first 3 steps. In this manner, in the proper sequence, we are going to complete all the steps mentioned here, and by doing so, we will be able to complete the job properly. So in summary, what is happening here? We have a job instruction sheet which lists all the different steps that we need to go through to complete the job. Similarly, we can have a job instruction sheet for other jobs as well. Let me give you an example of a job instruction training for a chef. So how might it look like for a chef? Let's assume we are going to instruct a new chef to prepare a fried chicken. So how might the job instruction sheet look like for a fried chicken preparation? So here it goes. I have not listed all these steps. However, these 4 steps will give you a clear idea how this thing works for a chef as well. So the first step is to wash the chicken. And the key important point about this step to remember is wash the chicken in running water for 2 minutes. So once you are done with this step, the next step is to cut the chicken into 8 pieces. And the important point to note regarding this step is to cut them into 2 drumsticks, 2 thighs, 2 breast pieces, and so on. After we are done with this step, the next step is to rub the chicken with spices. So here we have to use 1 teaspoon turmeric powder, 1 teaspoon chili powder, and other spices as well. So once we are done here, we can go to marinating the chicken. And the key point here is to keep it marinated for 1 hour. So this is the basic instruction sheet. So after this, we have multiple other steps to follow. However, this is the basic instruction sheet. And by looking at it, I'm sure all of you can get an idea how this thing will work for a chef if that person is instructed to prepare a delicious fried chicken. Now, regarding the last example, the same method of job instruction sheet can be applied in assembling a car. So as you can see here, a car assembly is going on, right? For example, you are a new employee in a car assembling plant, and there are many parts, thousands of parts in assembling a car. Now it is a very complicated process, right? So when someone new comes into the factory or the car assembling plant, what I can do is I can give that person a detailed 2 or 3 or 4 page of instruction sheet where I have all the step-by-step instructions of assembling a car. So again, that manual will have all the instructions of assembling a car from scratch till the very end. Alright? So that is how a job instruction sheet works. So yes, we have gone through all the 3 different training methods for today. So we have seen how a lecture method works, how an apprenticeship program works, and finally, how a job instruction sheet or job instruction training works. So we are done for today. So here is your reward again. Thank you for listening to this lecture. See you in the next class.